This actually began the other morning, rather early. I was walking and thinking about the miracles of God's care and how we sometimes fail to appreciate them in our lives. And as I was walking, a car started to come up behind me, kind of creeping. And sometimes it creeps me out a little to have someone come up slowly behind you while you're walking, especially if it's not fully bright. I got into the grass, the car stopped, window went down, and it was a neighbor. She said, "Larry, we got a good report." She said, "The cancer has not progressed. The chemo is working." She was talking about her husband who has stage 4 cancer, a man who has in his life endured over 30 surgeries. He's had neck and back fusions. He's had cancer previously. He has had hip replacement, another joint replacement. He's had transplants. He survived a terrible car accident. He's a heroic soul who never complains, never plays the victim card. My neighbor said to me, "I know it is the power of the prayers. It's as if the prayers are pushing back the darkness. And in this portal of time, whether it be for a week, a month, a year, or the rest of someone's life, these moments of hopefulness feel like God's miracle to them. There is light to live by, and there's a sense that they are cared for." Oh, it comes at you in a variety of ways. The other morning, I received an email, time dated 4:53 a.m., from a member of our congregation facing a 6 to 8 hour surgery away in another community, several hundred miles from here. I'd sent him a prayer with his surgery in mind, not knowing whether he would see it. He must have read it that morning. And he wrote to me saying, "I am ready to take on this challenge." And he said, "It won't be very long before you're going to be buying me lunch." When people show heart and faith and courage, when they could show fear and doubt and dismay, when they sense that the Lord is with them in the midst of tough and demanding circumstances, for me, that is the miracle of Christ's care. It always has a way of lifting us up and enabling us to see a broader picture and to be reminded, no matter what it is we are facing, the Lord has our need covered. Sometimes in a modern age, we have a very limited view of miracles. In fact, I would say we often don't have a very miraculous view of miracles. Now, miracles, in my understanding, are in many ways a setting away of the natural order, allowing God to work in extraordinary fashions. And I am sometimes challenged by people who will say, "No, that doesn't really happen." To which I reply, I don't want to be in the business of suggesting how God can or can't do something. That's God's territory. That's not mine. And miracles, in our biblical understanding, often are two-tiered. They are God touching a specific event at hand while revealing yet a greater truth of God's involvement in the human order. Think of Jesus, the one who restored the compromised hand, the withered hand, as it was called. Jesus calling a little girl from death to life. Jesus who would feed the multitudes with the multiplication of loaves. Jesus who would stop a woman from hemorrhaging who had hemorrhaged for a dozen years. Jesus who gives sight to the blind Jesus who calls Lazarus out of the tomb of death. He reaches those people at their deep point of need, but also in his miraculous activity comes the awareness of the inbreaking of God into the human order in a way that brings saving power and in a way that enables us to stop and behold the goodness of God at work. And sometimes, God is at work in our midst and we miss it because we're so preoccupied with our own stuff. We miss what God might be up to. I want to introduce you to someone whose witness touched my life. Meet Pearl. Pearl Wortham Thompson. She just glows. Pearl is now in her 90s. At the age of 17, she was doing a research paper, and she went to her public library to obtain a book. She was not allowed to check it out. She could take it into the basement area called the morgue, which was a dark, dank, dusty basement, and look at it there. She was denied a library card because it was an all-white library, but that didn't stop Pearl. Pearl became the first African-American teacher at the Hyde Park Elementary School in Cincinnati. She's a woman of great faith. Now she has some health limitations, so she has to sleep in a recliner. But she makes sure her recliner faces east so she can grasp the first vestiges of sunlight in the morning. And her first thought is this: what's the miracle going to be today? A belief that miracles exist is the baseline for this conversation. There's not a question in her mind that the activity of God is fluid in her midst, but sometimes, like you and like me, we may miss it. We may overlook the opportunity to notice something special that God is doing for us, through us, and on our behalf, because we often do not cultivate that deepened awareness of a relationship. And as people of prayer, we ask for the sensitivity of spirit to recognize what God is doing, and by His Word, to lift that up as that which is most foundational to the gift of life itself. Now, Pearl still had some things that she wanted to do in her life. And one of them she realized last summer. She went back to that library to get her library card 75 years later. The library knew she was coming. They would roll out the red carpet. They had a wheelchair ready. And she said, "No, I'm going to walk in and get my library card." People of faith are not bound by limitations. They are undergirded by Christ's care, which somehow penetrates every situation and circumstance imaginable. And sometimes we are left feeling fortified and uplifted in such a way we recognize that it could not have happened without God's deep and devoted care for our lives. The writer of the book of Psalms here gives us a wonderful witness to our God being the God of miracles. That wasn't up for grabs. That wasn't debatable. And the psalmist talks about especially the leading power of God's care that would take a people who were enslaved and lead them to a point of freedom. Doing what only God could do, and that was to create a pathway. And this pathway is across the seabed. The Jews of today would say, we were in bondage. Not they were in bondage. We all were enslaved. And God had a response that could transcend human dilemma and predicament. and forge a pathway from the darkness into a place called a promised land. Now, there are many of us here who are in need of knowing that there's a promised land for us in some way, because we may feel in bondage. We may feel in bondage to the things of drug or alcohol dependency. Sometimes it takes the form of pornography or excessive shopping. And we know it's not our best life. In fact, it's a compromised life. And it takes the grace of God to lead us to a better place. Some of us may feel enslaved to a spirit of fear. We always have a way of going to the worst case scenario, as if God was somehow removed and detached from us, especially at our heart-rending point of need. Some of us are enslaved to a need to be liked, to be popular, to feel that we will not be complete unless we get into the right school, or we make the team, or we are a starter, or we get that job promotion that we deserve and we've worked so hard for. And so often we are so riveted on our unique circumstances, we push away God's desire to bring us to a broader point of view and to realize that even in difficult circumstances, He is at work shaping our lives and doing that which we often cannot do for ourselves, and that is to give us blessings which transform who we are and make us glad and grateful people. If we step nearer to the promises of God, we would know more readily the presence of God moving in our midst. Now, when I was working on my master's degree, I had a very heady professor who was a Roman Catholic priest. In fact, he had been a theological expert at Vatican II in the area of the Reformation. Georges Tavard. Capable man. I don't know how good my French pronunciation is, but it'll suffice. And one of the assignments was to review a book written by another Roman Catholic scholar. And this book was devoted to analyzing the miraculous activity of God in human life. And the writer's conclusion was this, that miracles still exist. Imagine that. That miracles still take place, but only within the auspices of the Roman Catholic Church. Well, when I wrote my paper, I said, who has the right to define or determine where God will choose to operate and extend His miraculous saving presence in the human experience, and to limit it to only one arena? It was probably the only A that Tavard ever gave me. He said, "You have it right. That is correct. You cannot put a boundary on what God can do. But sometimes we thwart that by our own closed hearts, rather than saying with a sense of hopefulness and trust, what's the miracle going to be today? If God is a God who seeks to love you and bless you and draw you near and make you His own, what's that miracle going to be? Will it be a sense of healing? Will it be a sense of reassurance? Will it be an unexpected opportunity? Will it be some manifestation of love or worth or purpose in Jesus, who would come to die for you and to me, that we would know God's every blessing of mercy? We have that grand opportunity to see the grace of God companioning us no matter what it is we might face. We live in a world where we often descend into fear. and the challenges that we continue to hear about and reiterated about terrorist activities ultimately become a spiritual battleground. And it takes Christ's saving love to transform a human heart and move it from wanting to hurt to wanting to help. To transform our lives so that it is no longer about us. It is about what we are here to do and how we are here to serve. It is about finding life in that which you give away and invest in a life-giving way in the well-being of others. And sometimes we miss our opportunity to be influential because we are not devoted to prayer. We sometimes hear news reports and we say, what can I do? You can pray. You can pray. As my neighbor friend said, it is as if the prayer was the engine pushing back the darkness that had invaded her husband's life. The people of faith can combat terrorism by prayer. Sometimes we step back, friends, and we really don't expect the Lord to do something. In fact, we're often quite pessimistic. We have such a limited view of things. I had pushed this thing so far back in my mind, really, I had forgotten it until somehow it emerged. 11 and a half years ago, we moved to Cincinnati. I'm grateful we did. Thank you. We had purchased a home before we moved. That helped us have an established residence. It allowed Cameron to be enrolled in school. And now those payments were due. You know, the mortgage payment. And they were due, and I was $1,000 short. And I had worked here about 1 week. I hadn't been paid yet. So somehow it was like, I believe I'm supposed to be here. In fact, I will share this with you. I had never shared it before this morning. A couple of months before I came, I began to give what I would call a seed gift to Sycamore. It was a gift of faith, believing what God was going to be doing in future steps and wanting to support that and just honor God and give up control and say, Lord, this is going to be your deal. It isn't going to be mine. I'm not capable. But this day, sitting in my office, I knew I was $1,000 short. I didn't know what to do about it. And I was going through some cards that had come to me when I left the church in Michigan. And before I recycled them, I wanted to at least acknowledge the gift one more time and the thoughtfulness of the person who'd sent the card. And as I went through them, I was touched. And then I came to a card that had yet to be opened. That's not like me to miss something like that, friends. I opened it. It was from a dear woman named Yola. Inside was a $1,000 check. I felt like crying. I called Yola. I said, Yola, I just opened your card. I'm sorry. Oh, she said, don't worry about it. I know you're busy. I'm just glad I could do a little something for you. Little did she know that her gift had come to me exactly at the right time. Yeah, my human incompetence had meant that I just got to it then. And the Lord knew exactly when I needed to receive it. And it was a miracle to me. But the miracle that reminded me, Larry, I got your back. You're taken care of. Trust me. That promise is not just about a moment in time. Dear friends, it is about all eternity. Give it to him. He's got your back. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.